Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for November 25th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, as we attempt to defy gravity with this conversation.
It's Glicked Week.
Should be
Glicked
a
Week.
lot of fun. And if you're going to get wicked with the conversation, you might as well bring on someone that has the enthusiasm, and that is exactly what we've done, because we have brought on one of the best, or one of the biggest Wicked fans that I know, especially on the In Session Film team, and that is the wonderful, the great Erica Richards. Erica, welcome to the show.
Gotta love it.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
I am a Wicked super fan, so I am ready.
She's ready
I'm
to go.
more than ready.
We have
I've only
to
been
also,
waiting.
Yeah, we have to address this because for those listening to the podcast, not in YouTube form, but in podcast form, you should probably go and watch this on YouTube, I'll just simply say.
Yeah, Erica came, she didn't just bring her enthusiasm, she brought her wardrobe as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she's ready. She's got the hat, she's got the Wicked jacket on. She's totally ready to go.
I am ready.
Yeah.
Ready.
Yep, there it is.
You know how sometimes we say that people wear their emotions a little heavily on their sleeve? Some people also wear it on their heads.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, and this is a coveted witch hat from Salem. Like, this is like legit.
Dang.
This is not your, Spirit Halloween witch hat. This is from
that's
Salem.
the real deal.
So
That's
the real deal.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
Straight from the land of Oz.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that is very exciting. I'm so glad that you're here, Erica. It was kind of funny. I happened to just mention in passing to Shadon that we were doing this conversation, and without any hesitation really, she's like, "You have to get Erica on for that review." And I said, bet, you got it.
It's funny. She said the same thing to me, but opposite. She was like, "You have to reach out to JD and you have to be on their review of Wicked." And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to like overstep, also because obviously like I am a super fan. So, I just am gonna gush the whole time. So, but I was glad that you reached out because, of course, I would never pass up this opportunity. So I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah.
I have a lot of history with this story. So,
how many times have you
can't wait
seen the stage musical?
6 times. Yep.
6 times. Okay.
6
Brandon,
times.
have you
I
seen it?
saw it. Oh, I was just gonna say I saw it when I was like 15 years old with the original cast. So I think that is also why I feel so strongly about it, because that, not to sound dramatic, but that changed my life. So I have been obsessed ever since. But have either of you seen it on stage?
Mm-hmm. I've seen it once. And it wasn't with the original cast. It was on Broadway at the Gershwin. It was when Carrie Ellis was playing Elphaba, who I believe was, I forget if someone played Elphaba in between Carrie Ellis and Idina Menzel. I don't know if she was next in line after Idina. So it was pretty close to its popularity. I think I saw it in maybe 2006 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, JD?
I saw the traveling version here in Miami. My wife is a huge fan of the musical. And when we learned that it was coming to town, she immediately wanted to go. And I had never seen it at that point. This was not terribly long ago, maybe 3 years ago, something to that effect.
Wow.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it was relatively recently.
Yeah, that's good. I also just saw it this summer when I was in London. I saw it in London on the West End, which which was really
That's
cool.
fun.
It's funny because first time I saw it was in New York at the Gershwin original cast, and then it was one of those things like, oh, every time it comes locally, I'll see it. So I've seen it at the Hippodrome in Baltimore twice. I've seen it at the Kennedy Center in DC. And then my boyfriend and I, we were in London, and we had seen earlier like in our trip, we had seen Phantom of the Opera. Neither of us had ever seen it. It was like, let's go see Phantom. We'd heard really good things. And then our hotel was like right next to where Wicked was playing. So we were like walking by it all the time, and I'm just like, admiring it. And
It's like it's just they're egging you on the whole time.
Well, it was funny because he was like, why aren't we going to see Wicked? And I was like,
question.
well, yeah, I was trying to, I was like, look, I think I've taken him. Did I take him once or twice? I can't remember, but I was like, you've already seen it. Like, you're not going to want to see it again. I've seen it, 5 times. Like, he's like, I know, but we're in London. And like, he kind of surprised me on the last night that we were there and got tickets,
sweet.
like kind of last minute. Yeah, it was good. He
That's
got a lot of
cool.
points. He got a lot of points for that one.
Yeah. Good man. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so it was really good. It was just it was fun to like be in London seeing it.
Sure.
It's magical every time I see it. I'm always trying to chase that high of seeing it for the first time. And, like I said, being 15 years old, walking into it, having no idea what I was walking into. And then coming out completely obsessed. And, it was time when we were still buying CDs and playing CDs in our car. And I ran that CD to the ground, and it does not. It won't play anymore.
I still
like
buy
literally,
CDs, even if I don't have a place to play.
Do you?
I'm a collector.
That.
Yeah, I sometimes buy cassette
love
tapes
that.
just because I think it's a neat
Oh,
thing to
I
have.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still have some VHSs that I'm like, I will never let go of. But yeah, so it was one of those, like I said, I bought the CD, I listened to it around the clock, and I even bought the book. Being 16 years old ish and trying to read that book was, I don't know if either of you have tried to read the book. The book is not at all.
No. I hear it's very different. It's got not even just narratively, tonally, it's a very different experience too. It's a little bit edgier, we'll simply say.
Yes, and not an easy read. So it just sits on my shelf looking pretty and green because the pages are green.
Didn't Gregory Maguire write a sequel to it as well as as
Son of a Witch?
Son
of a Witch.
I heard that was even worse.
Yeah,
I haven't read that either.
I might try to give it a whirl again. But yeah, it was one of those. I was like, oh, this is not at all the story. I'm gonna just put this down back on my shelf, right? But yeah, so like I said, just completely obsessed. I've always been obsessed. It was
were you a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz, or did the musical just become its own thing for you?
It definitely became its own thing for me. I would say, I mean, I like The Wizard of Oz, but I've always been obsessed with like witches and witch culture, and like, growing up, like Hocus Pocus is one of my all-time favorite films. Like,
So
I would say it is I would say it's like
He's actually
a
wizard, in case you didn't know.
I'm a wizard,
No, I love it. Well, what's funny is, as much as I'm obsessed with like witches and things, I kind of went through this rebel phase where I was like, I'm not gonna get into Harry Potter. Like everyone was into Harry Potter.
Okay.
When we were children, right? Like when
so you were the hipster witch.
Yes. I was the Hocus Pocus witch, the the obsessed with the Salem witch trials witch type of vibe. But I have recently gotten into Harry Potter, and I enjoy it. And also did that when I was in London, by the way. If either of you have ever been to London, and you can do that, highly recommend. But and I do like those stories, but I also think I loved Wicked because it was a story about 2 women. And I mean, we'll get way more into the story, but I think I just I felt more connected to the story of Wicked than something like Harry Potter. Not that it's not enjoyable and fun and witchy as well, but
there are certain things that are made for certain people, right? And that's not a bad. Just like obviously, Wicked was a story that was made for you.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Well,
I love
that
that you
is
have your
very
wand,
exciting.
JD. I love it.
That was one of the best preambles we've probably ever had here on the show.
Yeah, we have a movie to talk about still.
We do have a movie to talk about. That's really great to hear. Certainly sets the table for Erica, her thoughts as we get into Wicked. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into this. Wicked is directed by Jon M. Chu. It stars Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, Peter Dinklage, Jonathan Bailey, Michelle Yeoh, Jeff Goldblum, and a slew of others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Wicked, you're probably not listening to this, but just in case, it is about Elphaba, a misunderstood young woman because of her green skin, and Galinda, a popular girl. They become friends at Shiz University in the land of Oz. After an encounter with the wonderful Wizard of Oz, their friendship reaches a crossroads. All right, let's jump into this. Of course, we'll start with you first, Erica. What did you think about Wicked?
What a question. You really have to ask.
Yeah, what a question. How much time do you have? No,
Timing
again, this is one of the like, I don't think I've ever been so excited for a film, ever. I have been waiting for this to become a film since the day I saw it on stage. So I went Thursday by myself, first available showing. My boyfriend was going to come with me, and he was like, I might have like work things. This is 2:00 on a Thursday. And I said, I love you. I'm going to be there whether you're there or not. So I ended up going by myself on Thursday because he had work things. And then I also saw it yesterday, which was Sunday, with some girlfriends. And I was like walking into the theater with my girlfriends, and I told them, you're definitely going to cry. I cried 2.5 times. And the halftime, I only say half because I started crying when the movie started on
just
Thursday.
when it opened.
I was so
You
just when
had
it
to hear
opened,
the
I was
opening
so
fanfare of
overwhelmed.
No One Mourns the Wicked, and that's all it took.
Yeah.
And the text font being like the Wizard of Oz, I thought was really clever. And I was just like having a moment where I was like, oh my God, I'm in the theater. It's actually happening.
It's
actually
very
like I'm
faithful
actually
to the
here.
source. It really
Yeah.
is.
Sure.
Yeah. And like, I'm here to see Wicked, and I can't believe this is actually happening because I just feel like it took forever to get to this place. So I was like, oh, like getting a little emotional. And then yeah, I cried 2 other times, which we can talk about. And then yesterday, Sunday, when I went to see it in the theater, I cried 2 more times at the same parts. So I'm predictable if nothing else. But no, I think this film is fantastic. Perfectly whimsical. I think it stays true to the source, right? Like we were just saying, but I think it also where the decisions were made to add certain things or make certain things different. And again, as a super fan, I'm okay with all the things that they did. More than okay with all the things they did. I love all the decisions that were made. And I will watch this film countless times. Like I can't even tell you how many times I'll end up seeing. Me and Shadon have a bet. She's made a number that she thinks I will see. So we'll see if I can.
Are you going to be like that
reach
guy from earlier this year that saw Doom Part 2 12 times in the theater?
Yes, that will be me. I can't wait to go to the sing-along versions. I can't wait to, it's just like this. I had to tell my friends, like, I'm sorry for the person I'm going to become after I see this film. Like, I can't help it.
Your
apologize.
entire personality.
I am changed for good. Yeah, like this is my personality
I see what you
now.
did there, but
you see what I did there?
Yeah.
But
although
so
we have to wait till
what?
Part 2 to get that one.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know what? Truly, like all jokes aside, I think it's an incredible film. I am so excited that so many people get to experience this film and the story because I think it has an incredible message. And there's so many people that are not fortunate enough to see it 6 times on stage like I have, or even once at all, right? So I'm just so happy that this film and the story and the message is reaching so many new and wonderful audiences. So
Yeah, how long has this movie been in production? It's been in talks for a while, right?
Well, you
I
know what's
wonder if I
funny?
can look that up.
So I have watched many interviews about this.
Yeah.
So what I am tracking is that what's really funny actually is that the story the story existed, they wanted to make it a movie when it was just the book and the story and
I
all of
remember
that.
hearing that, yeah, and it was Stephen Schwartz that really argued
Yes.
for the fact that this really should be a musical, and
Stage,
as
yes,
history
be
has
on
told us,
stage.
he was right.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
He was the one that pushed for it to be on stage, and that was the
Mhm,
right decision, right?
mhm.
And then I just think it was like, how do we take something like this and bring it into the film world? And
Yeah.
gosh, years. It's been in discussion for years. And I
Yeah.
think they started production over 3 years ago, I wanna say.
It was a while ago. It was even pre-COVID, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, because for a long time,
Mhm.
wasn't Stephen Daldry, director of The Reader and The Hours, tied to making this at one point before Jon M. was even announced? I think there were a
I
few
think you're right.
directors, and I don't think there were any casting
There
choices made. But I do think
correct.
there was at least one or two directors before Jon M. came on board, and clearly
Yep.
whatever success of Crazy Rich Asians and In the Heights led to,
Mhm.
obviously he was really tapped for that. But yeah.
In December of 2012, following the success of Les Mis, Mark Platt, producer of the stage version, announced that the film was officially going ahead,
Okay.
confirming that they were aiming for a 2016 release. Now, obviously, that did
Oh,
not
wow.
happen, but
Mhm.
Yeah.
Aiming for is the right word there.
aiming for 2016. We were
And missing
almost
the
a
target.
decade late, but it's fine.
We all have goals, right? We all have
Yeah.
goals.
Exactly. Some of us are just late to the party. That's okay.
Right.
Hey, well, I mean,
Uh,
given the success of this movie already, fashionably late, I think is the way to put it.
Fashionably
Great.
late. Yeah,
You know what's
absolutely.
funny is I was watching an interview with John Chu, and he was talking about how he saw Wicked before it was ever on Broadway. It was only playing in San Francisco, and he saw it in San
Interesting.
Francisco before it made its premiere in New York on Broadway, which I
Mm,
think is. And he was talking in this interview, and he was saying, how just like swept away he was by it, and how he was thinking, oh my gosh, somebody someday is going to be able to make this into a film. And he's like, it's
mhm.
insane that I am that person, because he's like, I thought about this when I saw it.
Everything seems so
Um,
serendipitous given that
yeah,
story he's talking about, and
yeah.
how back in 2012 didn't Ariana Grande tweet how Glinda was her dream role or something like that, and
That's
everything
So
just comes
crazy.
full
she's
circle.
Wow.
she has been a Wicked super fan forever.
Yeah.
And I remember when it was Wicked's 15th anniversary, I want to say they
Mhm.
did, or yeah, I think it was its 15th anniversary. They did like a special on, I don't know, CBS, NBC, whatever, one of those. And she came out in all green, actually, like
Mhm.
green lipstick, green eyeshadow, and sang The Wizard and I, which is one of my sneaky, like, favorite top like songs. I
Sure.
just think that song is so powerful, has such
Yeah.
good storytelling in it, so much good foreshadowing
Yeah, it's great
in the
lyricism in
lyrics of
that
the
one. I
song.
agree.
Yes. And yeah, I think either role she would have been one of her dream roles. But yeah, so she's been a Wicked super fan forever too. And I was watching another interview where Kristen Chenoweth was talking about how they sat together at the premiere and watched it, and uh Ariana Grande had come into her like backstage or whatever at Wicked when she
Mhm.
was like 10 years old, and said something to her like, I'm gonna be Glinda one day or something or whatever. And then
Yeah.
she said she leaned over to her at the premiere of the movie and was like, are you proud of me? And she's like,
Hmm.
I am so proud, so it's just like, I also love all the lore behind all of this too. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
eating it all up.
I just
So
I
yeah.
love this enthusiasm. The enthusiasm on this particular episode right now is so infectious. I love having this conversation here. And in case y'all
Yeah.
couldn't tell, I'm really trying to hone in on that enthusiasm, because it's an enthusiasm I don't fully share for the movie personally. I did like
It's
it
my goal
overall.
to convince you and change you by the
Yeah,
end.
please. Yeah, maybe I'll be changed for good by the end of this conversation.
Yeah.
But really, yeah, my issues with the movie Wicked really are more to do with a bigger overarching issue plaguing Hollywood blockbusters in general. So maybe we can talk about that later as this conversation goes.
Mhm.
But if we just focus on Wicked itself, as far as the story it tells and the way it's conveyed musically and performatively, there is something kind of special about it. It's really amazing how a great cast, perfect casting really can kind of save the experience in many ways. And
Yeah.
really it does come down to Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, who are, I don't know if they'll end up as two of my all-time favorite performances of the year. There's so many films I've seen with so much competition rather to compare it to, but this could be the best casted film of the year just for those two roles, because I do think they are sensational as both Glinda and Elphaba, respectively. They really do carry this thing to the point that I would almost call them co-directors of the movie. I really think they are that crucial to the film really working. Really, everything else as far as how it functions as a visual medium, I do have issues with. And we'll talk about that further. I think you may have some thoughts about that as well, JD. And I think it's really just an issue that I feel like is plaguing so many big blockbusters these days that look like they're made on the cheap when there's so much money being dumped onto it. And I have more thoughts on that. And it really does affect me, considering that this is a property that, as we talked about here, it was primed for the big screen. The Wizard of Oz, especially from 1939, is one of the most visually beautiful films ever made. So you would think that you would want a film to really tap into that same kind of vibrancy and that same kind of beauty. And I'm just not sold on Jon M. Chu yet as a filmmaker, given what I've seen. I just don't know if he's really the guy to tap into this type of magical realm. Maybe he'll prove me wrong someday, and I'm really curious to see if anything changes with part 2, which from what I understand is already filmed. I think they already have that filmed, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see if that changes anything. But I did still weirdly found myself pretty moved by Wicked. I did tear up at least once, to share your enthusiasm there, Erica. So clearly the film does work narratively. I just wish I also loved it visually, if that makes sense. And there was just something they're missing.
Yeah, and that's more or less where I'm at as well. I didn't quite love it, but I do think it is a solid adaptation. And I wholly agree that Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, they give ravishing performances here. They have a riveting chemistry on screen that is quite palpable. Jonathan Bailey is a lot of fun in this film too. I think the costuming and production design is excellent. At 2.5 hours, the film might be a little bit bloated, given that this is a part 1 of a 2-parter here, but it's at the cost of making this cinematic and taking advantage of the medium. There are lingering shots here that you just don't get on the stage. There are visual cues and wide shots that are inherent to film. There are pauses as characters exchange dialogue to emphasize the emotional underbelly of the film. All things that you cannot get on the stage, and add screen time here. That's exactly what you want out of these film adaptations, taking advantage of what cinema is supposed to be. I do really, really appreciate that about the film, which is to say the length didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I do have an issue with it, and I totally agree with you, Brennan. It simply comes down to execution, which I do think is a little volatile at times, particularly with the cinematography. The film's visual language, I do think, is tepid. The barrage of backlighting and desaturated colors are a bit of an eyesore, which is unfortunate because the material is great.
Yeah.
As we noted earlier, I love the musical. It's fantastic. The performances here bring an engrossing magic that is hard to deny. It's just a little bit of a dull film to look at, despite its prominent uses of green and pink. And that did deflate the experience a little bit. Now, on the whole, I did enjoy myself. I agree it's quite moving. There are a few scenes here that are quite stirring. I'm sure there's one about halfway through the film that we'll really get into with how emotionally stirring it is.
Oh, it might be one of the best scenes of the year. I know what you're talking
great.
about.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. But film being such a visual medium, with the cinematographer and just how desaturated a lot of this is, and given its source material, going back all the way to The Wizard of Oz, that did leave something to be desired for me. But I did walk out satisfied. I did enjoy myself on the whole. So I do like it, would absolutely recommend it.
Can I ask you both maybe a weird question, but I'm
Sure.
gonna get to a point. Like where did you see the film? Like, and what kind of theater were you in?
So yeah, that's a
Like were
great
you
question. I did not see it in IMAX or even in 3D, and I could tell, given the way it was framed, the way it was rendered, it was a film that seemed like it was designed to be experienced in a much bigger, more eventful type format. And
Mhm,
and I think that's that always raises a bit of a question for even me when it comes to how to judge
mhm,
a movie's visual language,
mhm,
because sometimes I think, okay, if a movie is meant to be seen that way, then is it okay if it doesn't look nearly as good if I'm watching it in a more normal type setting? And I think
right.
that is a fair question to ask, because
Mm.
watching Wicked in a more normal setting, by that comparison, I do think it looks kind of pale. And maybe that's
Mhm,
just given the fact that I saw it in an experience in a theater that was rendered a bit differently, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, I
What
did
about you,
see
JD?
this. I saw this at my local AMC IMAX. So I did see it on the biggest screen possible, at least at that
Mhm,
particular AMC.
mhm,
And still, walked away obviously with what I just said there. So,
Mhm.
I think there's so much to love about this in terms of the
yeah.
performances. Again, the production design, even the sound design, how
Oh
the
my
music is
the
rendered, the
production design is so
choreography.
the set decoration and production design in general is
Yeah.
it really is amazing, and knowing that so
Mhm.
much of this was all practical, the fact that they actually planted, what, like 6 million tulips for that opening
N
shot?
Yeah.
9
Yeah.
million. Yep,
9
9
okay,
million.
so it wasn't even
And
6,000,000. I thought I was being hyperbolic with 6,000,000, but apparently
no,
it's
I
even more
know.
than
I
that.
know. Right.
Yeah.
And the train, like that train being a practical piece of the
Yeah.
set is
And
incredible to me.
the thing is, like, all that stuff I know is real, and yet watching the behind the scenes making of the movie looked better than the actual movie to me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like it's
Yeah.
not one of those cases where the visual effects are bad, because we've seen movies where the visual effects just
Mhm.
aren't good. That's not the case here. It's more so the rendering of those sequences, and to your point,
Yeah.
JD, the backlighting that kind of gives everything this almost crisp cleanness to it, that for me, if I wasn't told that that train was real, I wouldn't have believed it. Like I like it to
Right.
me, it actually looked like CGI
Yeah.
because of just how
Right.
Yeah.
clean everything looked, and that's
Yeah,
Yeah.
really
it's
my
the
biggest problem
backlighting
here.
and it's the desaturation. That to me
Yeah.
is the big element because, as John M. Chu has stated himself, there's color all over this film, and he's not right,
Mhm.
Mhm.
or excuse me, he's not wrong,
Yeah.
but it's not vivid. And
Yeah.
there's one scene in particular halfway through the film where that is incredibly noticeable. Like it's
Are you talking
I
about
don't
Dancing Through Life?
understand the
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 the mu
filmmaking choice there to
Yeah.
remove that desaturation. I mean, it
Oh,
does
that one,
make
okay.
that sequence pop,
Oh,
and
I know
maybe
one you're
that
talking
was
about.
the
Yeah,
whole
you're
point of
talking
it.
about the ending of Popular, right?
Yes,
Yeah, where everything
yeah,
just turns pink.
yeah,
Mhm.
and like
Yeah.
they completely removed the desaturation filter, and all of
Mm,
a sudden the colors come to life.
mhm.
And I'm sitting there thinking, why are they not doing this the entire time? Like
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, unless the whole point of the desaturation was for that one moment to heighten that particular moment, I don't know.
Yeah.
If that is the idea there, I can't really get behind that choice. Um,
Yeah, that's
but
definitely a
man,
choice.
Yeah,
it's
it's
definitely a
definitely a choice.
choice.
But even so, like, to like another example, the one I thought you were going with there, JD, was the Dancing Through Life sequence, which I actually think is one of the best musical numbers in the movie, at least given the choreography and the fact that the camera actually moves in a very creative way. But that's
Mhm.
where the backlighting outside is actually most noticeable, to the point that it's almost kind of blinding everything that's in there, and then it becomes a bit
Mhm.
problematic simultaneously. But I also did appreciate the fact that the camera was finally moving in really creative ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so back and forth for me. It really is, and I wanted to love it
Mhm.
visually as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you guys feel about his explanation, Chu's explanation that he felt like it was more immersive, like immersing you into the world of Wicked and the Land of Oz. Like, do you think that's an excuse, or do you think that there's something there with that?
I think it comes down to two things. On one hand, I almost saw it as a bit of a deflection to actually answer the question. But at the same time, if it was a genuine answer, then I think it once again speaks to what I feel like is an overarching issue with many big blockbusters these days. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
attempt to make something seem and look so naturalistic that it lacks the vibrancy that makes movies such an appealing visual medium. And so many movies
And
these days
that's
do go for
yeah.
they do go for that type of naturalism nowadays, to the point that everything just starts to look like it came out of a cardboard box. And
Yeah.
to me, like I'd rather find something that looks visually appealing and interesting, but also unreal, as opposed to something that is so tangible to the point that it's no longer appealing to me. And I think so many movies nowadays, and Wicked's certainly better than most of the other most egregious examples we see in the past like decade or so. But I just think it's emblematic of a bigger issue, which is where I think it's most problematic.
Yeah, I mean, Wicked is not the first film by any stretch of the imagination to employ that desaturation effect. I do agree. I think it's a bit of a deflection, either that or he might not have the right awareness to make a film of this size and scope. I do love the practicality. I love how they
Yeah.
build so much of these sets. Again, the costuming, the production design, all of that is really great, but it just doesn't have that vivid effect on screen. It just doesn't pop like when you watch something like The Wizard of Oz. And the natural lighting, if that is indeed what they're going for here, doesn't make sense in this specific context, because the Land of Oz is a fantasy world. It doesn't have to have any sort of natural lighting. So I don't understand where he's coming from with that particular response. Now, I do think if anything, it's more of a deflection, and there are probably other elements at play that, for politicking reasons, he's not going to divulge in an interview. And what that comes down to, I don't know, but it's something that we see in so many blockbusters. Is it a budget thing? It's cheaper to shoot a film this way rather than, removing the desaturation. I don't know. I don't work in Hollywood, but my guess is it has something to do with that, because we see this so often with big blockbuster movies that my guess is it has to have something to do with that. And he doesn't want to divulge what that is, because he likes working, and he doesn't blame him. So, it probably comes down to that, but I don't know. It still leaves me frustrated, because I think, when you see how practical it is, and when you see that he is trying to employ a lot of color, if they would just let him remove that desaturation, this is a film that would be grippingly redolent. It would be one of the most gorgeous films of the year, but for whatever reason, that's what they chose to do, and it does make it a little frustrating. I know, and I don't know how much time we need to spend on that element.
I was just going to
because
say, I feel like we've said our piece. Maybe we can talk about the things that actually work, so we can bring a smile
I think there's
back
a
to
lot
Eric's
of good
face.
things here that we
Yes.
can spend time on.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So tell me what you loved.
Well, a lot of everything else, honestly.
Mhm.
If anything, maybe we're just being harder on the film because we're looking at this as a visual medium, but let's look at it
Right.
as a story. And I mentioned it earlier, the film is very faithful to the stage musical. It's almost to a T, musically and narratively. It doesn't really take many liberties at all. In fact, I don't even think it takes any liberties. And in a way, there is something to be respected about that. So there is something about Jon M. Chu's choice to be a little bit more restrained as a filmmaker and really just let the impact of the musical itself really do the heavy lifting for him. I can at least understand and respect that choice, because the source material does have a lot of power in it. And whatever he chose to not do still allowed that power to come through. And it, once again, really does come down to Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. They really are terrific in their respective roles. And I knew they were going to be good because I'm fans of both of them, but they still somehow surprised me. I like that shows how great that they were. And then obviously we're alluding to this. We haven't quite gotten to the specifics of it yet. There's a sequence right at the midpoint of this movie, which I think is the one we're all alluding to that probably brought all of us to some form of tears in one way or another. And it's the Ozdust Ballroom scene, which is seriously one of the best scenes of the year. It really
so
is
good.
that good. And it's also one of the best
really
shot
good.
scenes of the year. It's one of the
Yeah.
few moments where I felt like, okay, now they're actually getting a bit creative with the filmmaking side of things. But it really is a beautiful moment. And correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, that moment on the stage was kind of played a little bit more for laughs, if I'm not mistaken.
Very different on stage. Very different on stage. Still, it's funny because like the same exact thing happens, right? But it's such a moment of like pure comedy when it's on stage. It's like comedic relief. Elphaba shows up, she dances really silly, everyone laughs at her. Same thing, same thing. And Galinda like starts doing the dance with her, and it is still like a moment where that shows them coming together and now they're friends at the end. But I think this is where it's so much more emotional, so much more intense here in this. And I think this is also where, we've said this a lot, the medium of film allows that to happen because
exactly.
you're seeing
That's
close up.
100%. Yeah. That's exactly why I wanted to include that in my opening thoughts, because you do that enough times. That's why, even though it's a part one, this ends up at 2.5 hours, because you take a moment like that on the stage, it might come off more brief because it's actors acting in real time, obviously. And here the filmmaking slows down. It's emphasizing that emotion. You're getting lingering shots on these performers, and that emotion that was bubbling kind of underneath is now coming to the surface. And it's just this great exchange between two great actresses. And exactly that is taking advantage of what the medium offers. Impeccable
100%. And the message doesn't change, right? The message is the same in both parts, in the stage the stage performance and the movie adaptation. The message is still the same in that scene, but like we said, the medium of film allows it to be so much more emotional. That wrecked me in the theater. I was, just tears, and it was so unexpected for me because I knew it was coming, right? Like I know this story, I know what's about to happen here. She's about to come, and it elevating the emotions for me. That's like one of the moments that I will never forget, like experiencing for the first time how different that scene is. Compared to seeing it on stage. It blew me away. It blew me away.
It finds a new dramatic energy for the material, because you're right. It is, thematically speaking, this is not doing anything different that Wicked already did back on Broadway. Heck, maybe even something that already existed in Gregory Maguire's book from 1995, I think is when that came out. So the themes were already there. They just, like all these different mediums, keep choosing to interpret it in a different dramatic way. And these things are not subtle. They're very timely. They're always going to be timely. This whole idea of a certain upper echelon of class that takes advantage of the disenfranchised to basically use them as scapegoats for their own prejudices and wrongdoings. That's something that is always going to be the case. So the film has a timely energy to it. And I think the movie does tap into those themes pretty well. But it's in moments like that where it finds a new dramatic urgency with it that the stage musical just doesn't have. And that's not to say it's better in tapping into those things. It just has a different vibe to it that only a film can convey, which is kind of what I'm usually pretty snooty when it comes to part ones and part twos. But I think this actually handles the part one, part two split thing very well. Primarily because, it's only act one of the play. So basically, we have a year-long intermission is basically how we have to do this.
Which is a smart way to split it up if that's what you're going to do.
It is. But there are a lot of jokes out there that this part 1 is 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is almost the full length of the stage musical in some ways,
Yeah.
which I on paper, yes, that's kind of funny, but again, given what we're talking about here and how there are certain little moments to drag out, let characters actually look at each other and exchange what is basically unspoken dialogue, you can't really do that on stage.
No,
So
you can't.
Right.
That
yeah,
exactly.
so it picks the
No.
right moments to extend and like keep it
Yeah.
like to just to really
Yeah.
weigh itself
It
out.
lets it breathe. It lets
Yeah.
it breathe. It
Mhm.
lets those moments breathe, which I think is really
Mhm.
important. And I think back to the point
Yeah.
I made earlier when we first started talking on the podcast, I think as someone who is a super fan, the
Mhm.
parts that are a little different than what is on stage are adding to the story, adding to
They're
the themes. And this
extensions.
is why,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and this is why I'm like, I'm okay with every decision that was made because it's
Mhm.
not, and I think that was really smart that he didn't take anything away from the original. He only added to it.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think that's the right choice because I think people like me who feel really close to this story would have been devastated if any of it had changed.
Mhm.
That's the
I
only
yeah.
thing that I would
Yeah.
have been upset about.
Yeah, that's
No,
fair.
no, I completely agree. And again, going back to my opening thoughts, it certainly extends Act One out by another hour or so. But
Mhm.
if that
Mhm.
comes at the cost of the adaptation becoming cinematic, I will take that every single time. 10 out of 10
I
times.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I will take that every single time.
Yeah.
Which is why, again, my only criticisms here simply come down to execution, not what
Mhm.
they were trying to aim for. I think fundamentally they made the right choices. It simply comes down to execution and everything we mentioned earlier. But I think they made the right choices in terms of what they wanted to linger on, how they want to make it cinematic, and it comes through in an emotional moment like we were just talking about there at the ball, or it
Mhm.
comes through in them arriving at Oz and meeting the wizard and everything that happens with the monkeys and how they transform. All like again, all of what is that is brought to the table there in terms of at least how the camera is operating
Yeah.
and what the film is choosing to elongate. You just can't do that
Mhm.
on the stage. I love
Right.
what they do here, like watching the transformation of the monkeys or how the action unfolds. I don't always love some of the editing choices they make, but
Mhm.
again, that's
fair.
an execution thing. Fundamentally, what they're trying to do, I will take it 10 out of 10 times. Like that's why ultimately, despite my issues here, I still really enjoyed what the film was going for because I think it had the right goals in mind, and
Mhm.
it's anchored by two phenomenal performances
Yeah.
that it was so easy to, for at least for me, apparently that it hasn't been the case for some of our critic friends who I deeply love and admire, who
Yeah.
have struggled more than I have with the editing and cinematography. But I think those performances are so ravishing here that it was easier for me to get past
Mhm.
those execution things, because I was also moved. I was really moved by the story because the material is so great and where it was all leading to, and then it ends on what is the most iconic moment of the play probably,
Mhm.
and I think all of that was handled pretty well.
Yeah. I think the building of the tension in the defying gravity scene is so much more here again than it is on stage. And the on stage version is very intense and very suspenseful. And
That's one
it's
of
still,
the moments of Broadway going. Just
mhm,
like not even just the experience of seeing Defying Gravity and how they pull that off on stage, just the song itself. Because if you
mhm,
were to equate Broadway to classic rock, for instance, Defying Gravity is Bohemian Rhapsody. Like it's that kind
Mm.
mhm.
of
Yep.
iconic song.
It's a great
And
comparison.
yeah, I thought about that one for a little bit, trying to make
No, that's good.
trying to
That's
emphasize the
good.
importance of how great that song is, which is admittedly, I do wish that Jon M. came to play a little bit harder when it came to that song here. Because I feel like he's actually getting the most creative on musical numbers like Dancing Through Life and What Is This Feeling and Popular, which are more interior, more based on in a single room. I kind of wish that there was a little bit more, dare I say, trickery happening with the Defying Gravity sequence, as opposed to just two great performers really singing it and then leading to this really powerful crescendo that Cynthia Erivo delivers. I think she sings the hell out of it, and that's really what saves it for me. I didn't always love the way that climactic song came about here at the end visually. I didn't really love that. It just, to me, and I can't really say it without spoiling it, but there's a certain choice that happens that kind of disrupts the momentum for me. And I'm trying to be cautious because I don't want to reveal too much about what happens. This is what people want to be surprised by as far as how this experience happens, because this is the moment of the musical. And the fact that it wasn't the moment of the film for me kind of bummed me out a little bit, if I'm being honest. And it was less Cynthia Erivo. It was more so like everything else around it. It felt like when it got to that moment, I was just, okay, I'm just watching a CGI witch fly around. That's all it felt like to me.
Okay.
I feel a little harsh saying that. Did I just disrupt the whole mood right now?
Well, you know, I was trying to, I guess, interpret what you were saying there, because obviously you weren't getting into any sort of detail there. Because I didn't always love the execution of it either from a visual perspective. Again, the performances are great. The music is phenomenal. They're singing their hearts out. There's a lot to love there.
Yeah.
And leading up to, I guess, that pivotal moment when we see Elphaba make her choice, I guess, it felt like there was a lot of waiting for
kind of like a stop and go kind of energy.
A little bit of a stop and go. And while that might build a little bit of tension, because we know that they're trying to capture Glinda and Elphaba, but it felt like the characters, while they're singing this song, they're simply just there waiting for something to happen. And that did kind of undermine the suspense a little bit for me. I think once she makes her choice and then she starts belting the song and she's getting passionate with her choice, and maybe this is where you and I have a little bit of disparity, that's where the number takes off.
No, that part I can that part I can still defend, mostly because of how great Cynthia Erivo sings it. Like, she does a great job from a performative side of it. If I'm going to get a little bit more specific without hopefully giving anything away, there's a particular moment leading up to that where I'll just simply say a character is falling for an extended period of time and sees something in the building's reflection.
Okay.
That did not work for me. That really disrupted the whole momentum for me. I get it symbolically.
Can you yeah, okay. I guess that's because I wanted to ask why.
I get it symbolically. I get it narratively. I get it emotionally. I felt like this, like maybe it was the execution leading up to that specific fall, because it involves the money shot that we see in the trailers all over the place, and musically just builds to this great moment that almost like it's almost like it's baiting you into making you think that's the moment you're waiting for, and then, oh nope, we're actually waiting for a little bit longer. And maybe it's that stop and go energy once again that I really thought disrupted the crescendo, I feel like. And I just don't think it was the right place.
I feel like I had the opposite reaction. Because,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because to me at that point something was finally happening. Because there was so much waiting as they're at the top, and of course they're singing the song and they're having an interaction. Is Glinda going to join her? Is she going to make the same choice? That's ultimately all that's happening. As we know, the monkeys are trying, the guards, they're after them. And there's a lot of build up as they're trying to find them. And that I did find admittedly a little mundane in execution, or at least it wasn't nearly as exciting as the song itself is. And so I was just sitting there waiting. And then so finally she makes the choice. And once she makes the choice, to me, that was like, okay, now we're back into it. There's actually some energy here. And then you tap into, as you noted there, the emotional symbolism of it
Mhm.
and what that means for Elphaba, the film had energy again. So and then it goes on from there and becomes what the moment is. So I think that's why like I had the opposite, because I was just there kind of twiddling my thumbs waiting for something to happen. So
Yeah.
I feel like I had the opposite reaction there. And
I
sorry,
just
Erica, I don't mean
I just have
to
to take a back seat. I just
steal.
have to acknowledge I'm here watching Erica right now, her nodding very nicely, thinking like, I got to put these two boys in their place. Let me talk here. Let me talk.
Yeah, I know.
Well, it is so interesting to hear you both talk about it and have different experiences with it. And as someone who the Defying Gravity scene on stage is life-changing for me. That was the
Mhm.
moment on stage that I was like, "Oh my god," right? So watching it on screen happen and thinking I know what's gonna happen and then it playing out differently was an experience for me,
Okay.
um, because I feel like okay, let me break this down. I feel like in this in the stage adaptation, in the stage performance, um, it's so different than what's happening in the film, right? It's essentially
Mhm.
just Elphaba and Glinda
Yeah.
and nothing else on stage, right? And there's that moment where the broom flies in from off stage coming to Elphaba, and she's so confident in that moment and so sure of
Mhm.
once we're talking about like how in the song she's saying this is what she's choosing, and then from
Mhm.
there when she elevates on stage versus her falling. Oh, sorry, I maybe just spoiled that, but we were
That's
kind of
okay.
talking about somebody
It's fine.
falling, so
It's
I think we
okay.
can assume who
I
it was.
Yeah.
I think even the way I said
Whoops.
when a certain character is falling for an extended period of time, I think that's enough to decipher. Oh, it must be Alphaba. So
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think I
Yeah.
was
Right. So
cryptic enough with that.
okay. So I felt it was this weird thing where I was sitting there watching it happen on screen and I kind of immediately felt defensive, like my girl
Mhm.
knows how to fly. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I felt and then I realized what they were doing with that. And
Mhm.
again, I accept it in a way that's like, okay, this is adding so much more depth to this moment. And I think it made it more emotional for me. Um, to her finally getting to that moment, right, where she's like defying gravity in front of
Yeah.
them and in front of the and I loved the cape, like how her cape was so wide and broad
Mm.
in that like final moment because that's also
Mhm.
how it is on stage and I
Yeah.
love that it was kind of like a nod
It's
to
a good
that.
callback. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like I also appreciate the things you both have said about this and of course like your experience is what your experience is, but
Mhm.
I really had to have a moment with myself in the film at that time, accepting that it's different than what I expected it to be,
Mhm.
different than what happens on stage, but appreciating it nonetheless because of what it does for the film.
Yeah,
That
and I
makes
think that's a
sense.
great
Sure.
point. And I think this is why, once again, when I make any criticisms like this, for those listening, really take it with a certain grain of salt because this is still me, maybe harping on the filmmaking more so than I should be. Once again, if anything, maybe it could go
Yeah.
back to the executional side of things that we spent too much time talking about already. That we promised we were going to stop talking about. Apparently, I'm talking about it again anyway, and it might come back to that as far as editing choices to really amp the climactic nature of that moment, because I do think
Mhm.
dramatically that does make sense. That difference makes sense. I don't have an issue with the way it's symbolically visualized or anything like that.
Right.
It's
Right.
what, but I guess it's the way it treats the climactic buildup that is still ultimately there to those lyrics. As Cynthia Erivo is finally singing the final chorus of that song. So if you dare to
Mhm.
find me, look to the western sky. There was
Yeah.
something missing there for me from a filmmaking standpoint, really leading up to that. And I don't know what it is. I don't want to make, like, I guess, guesses or even suggest anything that I think could have made it more interesting for me, because that's a me thing. That's not me
Do you
saying I'm
think it
thinking
was too focused on the cat and mouse of it all, and
I
maybe not enough on the internal emotion that could have, that they could have tapped into maybe a little bit further?
I think it was just a missed opportunity visually, because I think it's one
Okay.
of those cases where I keep looking back on an example like what Spielberg did with West Side Story, where he essentially invented his own new way of directing musicals. I've never seen anyone direct a musical like that before, utilizing a lot of one takes and uncut sequences there. I think there was a way to almost make it feel more like a thrill ride, if that makes sense. Because when you see that on stage, it's not just the dramatic representation of what you're actually seeing Elphaba go through. It's the craft of it. It's the stage production of it. There's
Yeah.
something magical about that. And I didn't quite get the
See-
filmmaking magic here.
See, what I loved about it, and here's like a counterpoint, is that,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep going back to comparing it to the stage, but that's
Mm-hmm.
what I think all of us
Yeah.
that have seen it on stage are doing.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, Defying Gravity is it for me. What I loved here is that I see her singing this and flying and hovering above these people and telling, like, if she's really singing at them,
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
can't hold me down.
That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
You're
you-
you're
like,
getting the emotional weight of it. And that's what's sad.
right.
That's what's filling in any
Yeah.
gaps like that for you. And that makes perfect sense. I get that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I love that. And there's a lot of other things, if we're trying to not spoil things, and I don't want to spoil
Mhm.
things for people that may have not seen it yet. There's a lot here that happens that does not happen at all on stage. And at first, again, because I think I'm so protective of
Yeah,
the original
yeah.
story, I'm like, what are
Sure.
they doing here? What are they doing? What are they doing? Oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? And then I thought it, like, for me, I think it made it a little more suspenseful because I
Okay.
was so satisfied in the end. I just think that song and the message there is so powerful for me,
Mhm.
and what it's doing
Mhm.
for the story. I think maybe I can look past some. I don't know. In the end, it worked for me. So I
Yeah. I get
see
it.
what you're
I get it.
saying. Yeah, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, but for me, it worked. It worked. I don't know. Call me a sucker. I don't know. It worked
I'm
for
not
me.
calling you. Yeah, I would never call you a sucker. I would call you a very
And-
beautiful Wicked fan.
Thank
And
you.
I feel like I'm kind of in the middle here in some ways, because it also worked for me ultimately. I agree the messaging is powerful. Revo is just phenomenal in that moment,
Mhm.
and it is very moving. I do think that the film left something on the table visually to really make that sequence more redolent, and but that comes down to the fundamental approach to this film that we talked about earlier. I
Sure.
think the issue that I had with the sequence more than anything was the cat and mouse of it all, as I talked about earlier. It left the film kind of just hovering for a
Did it
brief
linger?
moment of time.
Did the cat and mouse of it all linger too long for you?
I
Did
think it
feel
just
too
lingered
drawn
a little
out?
bit too long.
Yeah.
We know that they're being chased down. I wish the film emphasized that moment a little bit further between Elphaba and Glinda, and why Glinda makes the choice that she does there, because that's such a huge moment of the film, obviously, and it's what provokes Elphaba and what she says there to the outside, as you're talking about, when she's there hovering and kind of belting at them, which is really fantastic. And I just wish it wasn't constantly interrupted by shots of, monkeys flying in the wrong direction, or the guards coming up the stairs, or whatever it is that we see there. Like, I wish that the film stayed with those characters and really emphasize that emotion all the more. I do think there was a missed opportunity there. But that's why, again, I think given what the scene is, once she makes the choice, Elphaba makes the choice, and we see the fall and the symbolism there. And I do love how that is ultimately visualized there, given what this story is, what she had experienced, and how that tailors back to her youth. I think is really great, and it's what makes the character so heartbreaking. So like I do love the symbolism there. Could it have been rendered better? Yes, of course, but I think the heart of it is still beating there.
It is,
and is intact. And that was more than enough for me in the end, especially because of Erivo's performance. So it's just kind of it's the build up to the climax that I have more of an issue with. I don't know what the mentality was there from a storytelling perspective. I guess it's to build the urgency of it. I just feel like the film had already earned that. We had already understood what was at play. Let's emphasize the emotion. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
I wonder
think
if
it
either of
ultimately
you
sticks the
will.
landing.
I wonder if either of you will feel different on your second watch. You've both only seen it once,
Yeah, I've
right?
only seen it
That's
the one
correct.
time.
Yeah. That way we can
Okay. I
focus on
wonder if
different
it'll be.
things. Yeah, because like
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
see a movie for the first time that has so much going on, you're trying to latch on to everything simultaneously, which is kind of impossible,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Right.
And at the same time, when it comes to a movie like this, can I distance myself from my usual criticism of blockbuster filmmaking nowadays, which is something I am very hard on, probably even more so and unfairly so nowadays. And Wicked is falling into that trap for me. But if I can distance myself from that, will the film ultimately work better? And I will absolutely be giving it a second go, maybe even a third go, especially if I watch it again sooner rather than later, especially not waiting a full year for part 2, because I'll probably watch it again in preparation for part 2. Not sure what we're going to get with part 2. I don't think part 2 is going to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I'll simply say that. I don't think it's going to be
No.
nearly as long. But it'd be fun to make some speculations on what we think might happen with part 2. But
I mean, if it's as
Do you
faithful
think-
as this one is, I mean, I think we
I
already
was
know
gonna.
what's gonna
That's
happen.
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
I don't. That's the. I'm so like I keep on thinking about that, because on one hand there is a lot that happens in part 2, but it also feels like an extended climax in many ways.
Yeah.
Okay, so full disclosure, Erica, don't get mad. I don't love Act 2 of Wicked.
I won't.
That is kind of my my one kind of thing.
That's
With I
okay.
love Act 1. In fact, I actually think if Act
Yeah.
1 was the full musical, it'd be one of the best musicals ever made. I feel like it actually has a complete story.
100%. It's so
Yeah.
funny that you say that, because I remember I remember the first time I saw it, like I said, I had no idea what I was going into. My mom was with me, and when it ends there on Defying Gravity, and literally everyone in the audience is just like, and she looks at me, she goes, "Is it over? Is that it?" And because it really does it feels like a complete story, right? And
It
then
does. Yeah.
what's funny is too, like, a good friend of mine who is a big Wicked fan, not as big as me, but a big Wicked fan as well, and she hasn't gone to see it yet, but she's like, "Wait, this is only the first act?" And I said, "Yeah, this film, there's going to be a part 2. This film is only act 1." She goes, "Oh, I think I might just only see this because this is the best part of it." And I was like, "You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're not
Got
wrong."
all the best songs. It's also
Yeah.
like thematically speaking, it actually is the story. Act 2 in many
Yeah.
ways is really, again, not to spoil things for those who haven't seen Wicked on stage, so they don't want to know what happens. Act 2 is when it becomes a more literal prequel to The Wizard of Oz, I'll simply
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
way more
Exactly.
interested in some of those narrative turns, which are interesting. I find this pocket of the story more necessary, if that makes sense, and very conclusive on its own terms.
Because if you're going to function as a prequel, which it is, at some point you have to get there. At some point you have to make that turn. And that might be the less interesting part of it, but that is fundamental to this being a prequel. So that's just inherent to it.
Yeah.
But
I am
don't
also
know,
interested. Yeah. I'm interested to see how it goes, because I wonder if it's going to feel a little rushed, because I do always feel like when I'm watching it on stage, it's a little rushed getting to that, to get us to the Wizard of Oz, right? Part where the story picks up. It's funny because I went with it was 6 of us total of my girlfriends. So 5 of my girlfriends, two of who had seen the musical on stage. So they knew, they know the whole thing. 3 of the other women had never seen it. They knew nothing. They had no idea what they were walking into. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe you guys are going to have to wait to find out what happens. And they're like, really? Because I don't feel like that was much of a cliffhanger. But I think for me, knowing what is coming, knowing what, because a lot does happen in that second act, right?
A lot does, yeah.
That I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, how are you going to go a year? I'm like, we're going to have to go to New York City and see it on stage. Like, I'm going to have to take you guys to go see it because you need to see what happens. And they're like, yeah, I mean, I'm excited for it to come out, but I feel like that was really satisfying,
This has a beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
I've heard some people say this feels too cliffhangery, and it's like, I don't agree with that. I think Act 1 of Wicked, in this case, Part 1 of Wicked, is its own movie, which is why, like technically, this is still just called Wicked. It says Wicked Part 1 when the title card appears, but this is still being titled on Letterboxd, IMDb officially as just Wicked, and I kind of like that because it does feel like its own entity in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the sequel or Part 2 will just be called Wickeder, which I love. That's what we're gonna go with.
More Wicked.
More Wicked. Yeah.
The Wicked Woman.
I mean, I think what is great about the first half here, or Part 1, and I think you guys nailed it. And of course, it goes back to the source material. Like, there is such a richness to the story and how it fully realizes these characters that, especially at 2.5 hours, it does feel fully realized. And even though there are certainly loose threads at the end of Part 1 here that are, of course, wrapped up in Part 2, but even if there wasn't a Part 2, I think there's enough of a crystallization that you can connect the dots to The Wizard of Oz. And that is the brilliance of Act 1 here. And I can only imagine when the original music or musical was being written, they got to this part and realized they had a masterpiece and had no idea how to finish this, and just went home and got drunk and was like, let's just do the prequel part. Like, I don't know what else to do. Like, it's over. Like, it's done. You can only go downhill.
There is something to be said about that sort of narrative framework, which is kind of the reverse of most franchises, especially trilogies or like two-parters, whatever it might be, is that you tend to get more of the what up front, and then you get the why and the how afterwards. Whereas this is the other way around. It's like it gives you all of the meat and all of the real stuff up first, and then when you get to Part 2, as we're going to get, it's like, oh, okay, let's just tie some bows around this stuff now. Let's give them the what now. It's interesting how it does go in a different direction in that regard.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah.
Wickeder will be 30 minutes in and out, and we'll be good.
I mean, clearly, it's going to be a long movie because if Wicked Part 1 set any trend, or at least foreshadowed anything with Wicked Part 2, they're not going to cut any of the songs. And in fact, from what I've understood or what I've heard, they've actually written at least 1 or 2 new songs for it. I think I heard that. I don't have the source in front of me, so I can't confirm that 100%, but I think I heard that from some review or some interview with somebody about this. So in a way, it doesn't surprise me, because a lot of times when a Broadway adaptation is trying to compete as an Oscar frontrunner, they also want to try and compete in every musical category, even if they're not eligible for it. So they'll write something new that can then make it eligible for Best Original Song, for instance. So I get the political game of it. But I did hear that something original is being crafted for Part 2. Which, okay, if they're doing that, then maybe it is going to be a long movie. So we'll see about that.
Interesting. Yeah. Can you send that to me offline?
Yes, if I can find
see
that, and if I can find that confirmation,
you can find it.
So for those listening, if I'm talking out of my butt right now, then please let us know. It's just something I heard through the grapevine, so I have no confirmation whatsoever yet.
I do.
That's interesting. I don't know how I feel about that.
I do see one article here that confirms what Brennan is saying, but it's not from one of the big trades. So I'd like to find another one to confirm.
Yeah, I'd like to trace that back. I don't know if there's anything in there that maybe traces that confirmation back to another
Yeah.
quote from, let's say, the Hollywood Reporter or something like that, where I
Yeah,
feel like there's more
I need
safety
to find
in
another
confirming it there.
source to confirm that, but maybe Brendan is right. Or
mean,
they're making that up. I
have-
don't know.
I'm sure Stephen Schwartz will be
I think-
involved. He's in this movie. He has a brief cameo in this movie, so
Yeah,
he's
there are a
involved with
few
this production.
cameos in this film,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are. Yes, there are. Which, wow, that was a whole experience for me too.
Did you see that coming? Was that a surprise for you,
No,
Erica?
that was a
No.
big surprise. When I tell you, I gasped and screamed
Oh,
in
I'm
the
sure.
theater. I did not sing. I held back on the singing. I will be going to the sing-along versions when those start happening on Christmas and thereafter. I did not sing. There was a few moments that in my seat I might have like done some lip syncing, but
Sure. As expected.
but
yeah.
I did not sing, but I did gasp and like, oh my god, like in the theater
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
happened.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say if you asked me to bet money on whether those cameos were going to happen or not, I probably would have bet money to say, yeah, those cameos are probably going to be in the movie. I did not expect to be that degree of that the utilization of them here. That's what surprised me. It's like, oh wow, they're actually like these aren't cameos. They're actually in this movie.
They're part of the story. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's all we'll say on that because I don't want to spoil anything
for sure.
about it. For this, when I saw it the second time, I will just say when I saw it the second time, I had to actually pay attention because the first time I was freaking out so much that I had no idea. Like I missed the element of like them actually being there because I was just so freaking out that it was happening.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Love that. I know we've gone long here, but I do want to mention Jonathan Bailey. I think is really fun here. I love what he brings to the role.
So charming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's basically
extremely
Prince Charming come to life. It's
100%.
basically how they utilize him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to say, going back to some of the production of the film, that library sequence is quite great. I thought that was really, really well done. And in terms of, because I've criticized the filmmaking and the camera work, especially in this conversation. So I do want to take time to reverse the coin a little bit. I think that's where Jon M. Chu was maybe the most inspired outside of maybe Popular or the ballroom sequence, as we talked about earlier. But I love the energy of that sequence. I love the way the library comes to life and becomes a character in the moment. The music and the performances are obviously great, but this is a number where the production and the camera work is an additional character that is effective here. So I wanted to take some time to note that.
I think I heard
100%.
somewhere, I don't know if it was Jon M. Chu who said this, but someone said there was clear inspiration from 2001: A Space Odyssey during those.
Yes.
And it's like,
I think he did say that in an interview.
yeah. But it's like, wow, that is so
I love
obvious.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know I love that. Yeah, I'm like, okay, now because I'm also a reader and like the dream is to have like a library, right? And I'm like, give me a rotating library or give me death, right? Beauty and the Beast, who like give me the library from Wicked, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I didn't even make that connection with 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
so
very
fun.
inventive. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely my my favorite musical number of the film as far as the choreography was concerned. And I think really that whole stretch might be my favorite sequence of the film. I did mention I didn't always love the backlighting during the library scene because it's just so bright in the background, but I love the camera movement. I love the parkour like nature of it all, and the way the way it then bleeds into the Oz Dust Ballroom sequence, which is kind of like an extension of it in many ways.
It is.
Like that whole 15-minute
Yeah.
stretch is probably the best stretch of the movie.
It's a great
Yeah.
transition for sure.
Yeah.
I will say, just because we're talking about this like that number, one of my favorite parts of the music and the lyrics is when, you know, if you are a fan of the original soundtrack, when Fiyero goes, "So, what's the most swankified place in town?" And
Yeah,
they don't
yeah.
do that in this, and
No.
I like missed that. Like, I know it's such a small little thing, but I'm like, I wanted to hear him say,
yeah,
"What's the most swankified place in town?"
It makes sense as to why it wasn't in here, because apparently something in the
Yeah.
script established that conversation before the musical number
Yep.
even began. So it's like, oh, I guess he's not going to talk
Mhm.
about the most swankified place in town, is he?
I
just-
know, yeah.
I don't know, just like
He says something about
yeah.
going to the Oz Dust Ballroom, and
Yeah.
because Glinda is like, "Oh, we can't go after, you know, hours or what." She says something, and I'm just like, "Yeah, this isn't."
Yeah,
So there's
yeah.
a lot of things. If you know the story really well, like so of course all my girlfriends that I went to the movie with that had never seen it, they're asking me like, what was different? And you know, I also loved here too. How much more they incorporated like the animals into
Mhm.
the story, whether it was from the beginning where like the animals were like the doctors that were delivering Alphaba, to more of the professors being involved in being animals, and
Yeah.
you know that also plays out differently in the
They
stage
personified
production.
them more here, so those ideas on animal cruelty certainly become more
Yeah.
apparent than ever
And
before.
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
yeah, and it makes Alphaba her stance on that way more like believable and you
Yeah.
know,
Sure. Yeah, there's a tangibility to
Yeah.
that.
a lot
Yeah.
more weight behind it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I loved that. But yeah, like
Agreed.
her like eavesdropping on that conversation with the professors,
Mhm.
like that doesn't happen in the state, you know. But I love
Yeah.
and like again, I just think all the choices they made that are different than the stage production really just took it to the next level. I think it made
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
I won't say better because it doesn't need to be better, but it just makes it
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 makes it
just
make
cinematic.
sense
adds to
for the
it.
film
It's fun.
medium. It
Yeah.
makes it make sense for
Yeah.
the film
Yes,
medium. But yeah, if there is
exactly,
one
exactly.
mistake that it made, going back to something we were talking about, the lesson here is we need more excuses in life to say the words swank, right? Swanky.
Swank.
Swankified.
Yeah.
We need to say that more often in
Swankified.
life.
Yep.
Well, this was
I
a
agree.
swankified conversation. I'm
There you
glad
go.
that we had it.
Well said. Well played.
Do you
I
guys
love it. I love it.
do you guys have any final thoughts on Wicked as we wind down here?
It's gonna make a lot of money.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It already has, yeah.
Yeah.
Just go see Wicked multiple times. Go sing it. Go sing it at the sing along versions. Have fun with it. Celebrate the story and the characters, and
Mhm.
you know, I love I also love the message. I think the message is also really good for kids. You know,
Mhm.
don't judge people by the way they look, or you know, maybe a story that we've heard a million times isn't exactly the way we thought it, you know, isn't like what we thought it was isn't exactly the way it went down. Maybe we don't know the full story. So question
Mhm.
things, stand up for yourself, stand up for what you believe in.
Mhm.
I think all those messages are there and really strong. And you know, I just think this I'm so glad that I knew I was never going to not be satisfied by the film, because like having such high hopes for something but loving something so much, I wasn't going to just be like blindly like this is great no matter what, but I knew like it couldn't disappoint me because I love the story and the music so much.
Yeah.
But seeing so many other people celebrate it, and you know, as just seeing how well it's doing is just making me really happy.
Yeah.
So
Are you a big fan of musical theater in general?
yeah, I am. I am. I love musicals. I've seen Hamilton a few times. Of
Okay.
course, Baltimore Girl, so I love Hairspray.
Mhm.
I've seen Aladdin. I love musical theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Is
But
there
Wicked
one? Yeah.
is what got me into musical
Yeah.
theater.
Is there one in particular that you would love to finally see get the movie adaptation treatment that just hasn't happened yet?
You know, it's funny. I I mean, like, I don't know how they would do it, but I would love to see Hamilton kind of in this way.
I feel
Just
like that's
because
a yeah,
Hamilton
that's
is like
yeah. It's so cinematic already. I
yeah.
feel like it translates very well. Yeah, it's a good choice.
Also just such a great story and great music, and it is I would say, like, one of my second, third favorite,
Hmm.
because again, Hairspray's already been made, so I love Hairspray
I
because,
actually like the adaptation of Hairspray. I think that's pretty good.
yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great. So yeah, I think I mean, there's so many other great ones out there, but I think Hamilton, just because, um, the recording of the stage production is great. And
Hmm.
I've watched that. I will say that I didn't watch it until after I already saw it on stage, because trying to watch it before I saw it on stage was
Yeah.
like, this is strange. Um, but I think just for rewatchability, I think it would be really rewatchable.
Oh,
Just because,
sure.
again, the
Yeah.
story and the music is so great. So
Yeah. I think it's a good
Mhm.
answer. It's a great answer.
Yeah, good stuff. Good
yeah.
movie. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it again soon as well.
Mhm.
As I noted earlier, my wife is a huge fan of this musical, and
Yeah.
we will be going to see this because she hasn't seen it yet. So,
Wow.
She hasn't seen it yet?
Wow.
no, she wanted to wait because there were a lot of, I guess, mentions on social media that people were misbehaving in the theater with this film. And by
Mm,
that, I mean people were singing along instead of
mhm.
watching the film.
Or taking
And she
pictures.
didn't. Well, that's another issue. Maybe I'll bring that up here in a second. Uh, it was, she was more concerned that if she went to the theater and people in the on opening weekend were so caught up in their enthusiasm and were singing along, that, like, she wouldn't enjoy that. She's not there to watch
Yeah.
strangers in the crowd sing
Mhm.
along. She wants to hear the performances. So she was a little concerned and decided to wait until after opening weekend. I went. I will say, for all of the misery we've seen on social media, my crowd was flawless. They were fantastic.
Good.
Same,
Good.
They
Good.
were
same. Both
Same here.
really great. And
both
not
showings I
just,
went to.
yeah, and not just respectful, but they were actively engaged in a way that you want from a theatrical experience, and that I really did love. Like,
Yeah.
despite all
Mhm.
my criticisms, I mean, I noted that I still very much enjoyed it. I was moved by it, but I particularly loved the theatrical experience I had because the crowd I was with, and it was a full showing, not an empty seat
Mhm.
in my IMAX showing, and everyone was completely with the film and
Hmm.
responding to it,
Good.
and that was really great to see. Like, that
Good.
was just really moving, simply as a
Mhm.
lover of cinema. To
Mhm.
see the crowd so actively engaged was really great. So,
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah, I do look forward to going back and seeing this with my wife. I know she's going to absolutely die over this. It's
Yay!
going to be great. So,
Yay! Oh, I'm
it,
excited for her. Yeah, I also
yeah,
had both showings I went to, everyone was fantastic.
Yeah.
Nobody was
That's good.
singing, nothing. So,
yeah. Yeah, so hopefully the people misbehaving is in the I guess the vocal minority, as it were, because, man,
mhm.
there's been a lot of photos and videos shared online, and
Sounds like it's not
it's
an
not
East
great.
Coast problem then. Or at least like
No.
Eastern United States problem, given where the three of us
Right,
are located, right? Maybe it's all in
right.
Yeah,
California where the misbehaving is.
yeah, yeah. It's all
Yeah.
those Californians.
Yeah.
No, I'm just
Or those
kidding. I don't know.
Midwesterners. Those
It's the
Midwesterners. They
Wicked
can get
It's
West.
away.
it's Ohio. Let's
It's
be
the
honest. We
Wicked
It's
all
the
West.
know
Wicked
it.
West. Well said, Erica. Well said. It's the
The
Wicked West.
wicked Midwest,
Oh my
particularly
gosh.
Ohio. We know it's people from Ohio
Oh.
because they're the
Gosh,
worst.
we set you perfectly for that one. That was
Yeah,
amazing.
good stuff. All
Oh.
right. Well, thank you, Erica, for being here. This was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh my god, this was so great. What's funny is I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I could talk about
I
this
know.
film for hours, and but no, this was so fun. Again, such an honor to be here with you both. Thank you so
Oh yeah.
much
Mhm.
Great
for
having you.
having
Yeah,
me. This was
absolutely. Yeah.
so fun.
Yeah, this was a
So
ton of
fun.
fun. You're already invited back for part two, obviously.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
Obviously.
Written in. Yeah.
obviously, we'll have to make that work. I know you travel a lot, so whenever that film
Yeah.
comes out, no traveling. Or
Don't worry,
if you're
I'll
in
be-
London, you're podcasting from London. So
I'm already
I'll-
I'm already seated. I'm already seated for the film, so
I'll-
don't worry.
I'll make sure to dress up for that one. I'll actually bookmark that.
Yeah.
I'll
Brendan
I'll
will
wear the
indulge
ruby
for that one.
slippers.
You have a year to
Okay,
prepare.
okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Uh,
That's right.
Erica, where can we find your work online? Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, so at eRock Reviews on Twitter, I will always call it Twitter. I know it's X, whatever.
It's Twitter.
And
That's definitely Twitter.
Shadon and I had the conversation yesterday that I need to join Blue Sky. So I guess
Yeah.
I'll see you guys there. I don't know. I got to set that up. I have no idea. So
I just set it up a few days ago, so I'm even behind that.
Oh,
curve,
okay.
honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, well, I guess I got to figure that out now. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So
All right. Well, be sure to join Erica there. You can also find her on Chasing the Gold. There's going to be a new Chasing the Gold this week. I am told that you and Shadon went further on this film as it relates to award season. So that should be a lot of fun.
yes. Yes.
Be on the lookout for that as well. Okay, well, with that said, we have another review coming out this week as well. We're going to be talking about Gladiator 2, the lovely Ridley Scott. He is back. Be on the lookout for that. Episode, what are we on? 612, I believe we're on.
Yeah,
I
six
think. I
something.
don't know, numbers, math, who knows. Whatever the next main show is
Yeah.
this week.
We'll figure that out before we air it.
Yeah, it'll come out a little bit later because of scheduling and timing. We ended up recording these reviews first, so they'll go out, and then the main show will come out sometime this week. As I noted, a new Chasing Gold, and there will be a new Women in Session as well. So be on the lookout for all of that. Thanks again, Erica, for being here. My last final thought, and then we get out of here. And I haven't really mentioned this yet, but I feel like now it's the appropriate time. Brendan is rocking a wicked mustache this month. It is phenomenal. And I had to get that off my chest.
It's Movember, baby. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
It is great. I can second that, everyone. I can second that. If you don't
Go to
tune
the
in to see
YouTube.
my hat, if you don't tune in to see my hat, tune in to see the mustache.
Yeah. Wicked mustache. Absolutely.
Yeah, I went as a lumberjack for Halloween, and I decided, I'm going to try, because I had a full beard growing, so I decided to just shave the beard portion and keep the mustache. And my wife's like, "You are not getting rid of that. You are keeping that."
Keeping the mustache.
Yeah, she told me
There you
not
go.
to get rid of it.
There you go. I love it. No, very complimentary.
All right, good,
I'm
good.
with her.
I appreciate you saying it.
All right. With all of that said, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.